Hey folks, Dave Temple here. As you know, my podcast is all about talking to the best thriller writers in the world. Now, while I don't put myself in that category of the best, I've certainly got my hat now in the ring. And after nearly 3 years of hosting this podcast, I think it's time to toot my own horn, if you will. So with that, I'm offering my thriller, The Poser, for sale all this month. It stars Detective Pat Norelli, a rookie cop working the overnight beat in Hollywood when one of the town's biggest stars is found dead in her Hollywood Hills home only hours after winning an Oscar. Beloved by her fans, Pat thinks someone wants this star dead and sees this as a way to forge her own path and get the promotion she craves. I'm proud of the response I've gotten from fans, and I'm confident you're going to like The Poser. So for the rest of this month, you can get the ebook for only $5 or the paperback for $14. Since I do this weekly podcast as a free service, perhaps you'd consider this as a way to help out a fellow thriller writer. There are two ways to reach the link. First, you can go to davidtemplebooks.com, scroll down to see The Poser, click, and you're on your way. Or head over to Amazon. You can find it there. Again, davidtemplebooks.com or Amazon. Thanks in advance for your support. And now, on with the show.
James Flynn is an expert shot, a black belt in karate, fluent in 4 languages,
Ciao, hola, bonjour, hello,
and irresistible to women.
Oh, thanks.
He's also a heavily medicated patient in a Los Angeles psychiatric hospital. Flynn believes his locked ward is the headquarters of Her Majesty's Secret Service, and that he is a secret agent with a license to kill. When the hospital is acquired by a new HMO, Flynn is convinced that the Secret Service has been compromised, infiltrated by the enemy. He escapes to save the day, and in the process, Flynn kidnaps a young orderly named Sancho. This unscheduled day trip turns into a very real adventure when Flynn is mistaken for an actual secret agent. On a remote island hideaway, paranoid delusions have suddenly become reality. And now it's up to a mental patient and a terrified orderly to bring down an insecure evil genius bent on world domination.
Whoa! That's the way to start a show. Haris Orkin.
Well,
How are you, buddy?
I'm good. That was very impressive. It was great to see that. I haven't seen that for a while.
Dude, I just want to say, first of all, how in the wide world of thriller novels does a guy get permission to use a character as iconic as James Bond and rip it off into a story like You Only Live Once, which is a fun read?
Well, it's parody, so it's satire, and I don't ever actually say the name. It's just someone, and honestly, I kind of based it on not just James Bond, but I was such a fan of all those shows in the late '60s as an 11-year-old kid. Man from U.N.C.L.E., just all of them. So
Yeah.
Secret Agent Man, yeah. But James Bond was the paradigm for sure.
I love it. By the way, folks, You Only Live Once. Just imagine, as the promo just played, imagine James Bond-ish in a psych ward. What I like about this book, I'm just going to say this out of the gate, Harris, is the fact that, your brain, having grown up on James Bond, completely buys it. You pull in, you completely buy it, and you kind of forget the fact that the guy's a Looney Tune, but it's just a good, fun read. This is what I call the perfect, beach read, weekend read, kick back, relax, have some giggles, and still get a little bit of espionage at the same time. So kudos to you, buddy.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's supposed to be fun,
Yeah.
I love comedy thrillers, and I just want to, and honestly, I don't think I could even write a straight on thriller. It's just my brain doesn't work that way. It goes towards the comedy, I think. So.
All right. Well, before we get started, I want to comment on your T-shirt because I'm a huge fan of T-shirts. That has to be the dude as Da Vinci. Is that it?
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's kind of, the dude is kind of my spirit animal, really. So.
Oh, I love it. Oh, one of the best movies of all time, The Big Lebowski.
I know it's one of those ones that I just whenever it's on, I'll just start watching it again.
Yeah.
It's like
The dude abides.
yeah.
All right. Let's for my listeners and viewers on YouTube, let's talk about how our paths cross. Now, here's a fun little tidbit of information, folks. Haris's dad, Dick Orkin, was a legend, rest his soul, legend in the commercial world, and I discovered him. This had to be 85, 86. I'm doing afternoons at WNIC in Detroit. And I discovered him and his comic talents. I'm going to stop there and let you tell me about him because just a legend in the biz.
Yeah, he had such an interesting background. He passed away about 5 years ago, but he did teach me a lot about writing comedy. And I worked for him for a number of years writing commercials. So that's kind of how I learned to write comedy dialogue working for him. But he was he's worked in radio in all around the country, KYW in Cleveland, WCFL in Chicago, where he created the Chicken Man show, which was really fantastic. And I was like a teenager, and I would help him work on that too as well. Spent a lot of time in the studio with him. But he had he had really great acting chops because he went to Yale Drama School. He was he was going to be a serious actor. One of his classmates was Roy Scheider at Franklin Marshall College, and they would do all the shows together. And strangely enough, my dad would play the very serious stuff, and Roy Scheider would always play the comedy. So that changed later, didn't it? But
Yeah.
and then he went to Yale Drama School, and but I came along, and he needed to make a living, and so instead of going to New York, he started working for a radio station in Pennsylvania, and he continued with his radio career. And he did news and public affairs, and then ended up doing Chicken Man, and then from there, that's when he started doing. After he left WCFL, he started a company where they started doing comedy radio commercials. And with a guy named Bert Burtis. It was called Dick and Bert. And
Dick and Bert. Oh, man.
And it took off from there. They did ads for Time Magazine and just all kinds of like really big companies. So, and I was like a teenager, and through college I'd worked there, and he hired a lot of people from Second City because we were in Chicago to work as writers and performers in the commercials, and then he came out to LA in '78, and it was fun for me because I got I was doing some work for him, and we had like some of the best actors in Hollywood, comic actors in Hollywood coming in, Jack Riley and Kenny Mars. So I got to work with all these kind of comic geniuses. It was just, it was hard for you to write a bad script if Kenny Mars was doing it for you. So
I'm trying to remember when did Dick and Bert really skyrocket? What year was that? Ballpark me.
I think it was probably around 1978, 79. Okay. Maybe a little bit before that. And they moved, that's when they moved to California. They got an agent with the William Morris agency. They got hired. They were on the Tim Conway show for like a season. I think it only lasted this season, unfortunately. But yeah. But they, and then they split up, but they kept working on their comedy radio spots.
Yeah.
So you must have played a lot of both Dick and Bert and Radio Ranch spots when you were at
Radio Ranch. I mean, Dick and Bert, Radio Ranch, these are such fond memories because I was one of those kids that wanted to be in radio ever since high school. Well, junior high, because I got my first radio gig when I was 16. So, and, I heard tell, and that's about the time I heard of him, but I didn't really appreciate it because I wasn't in the biz yet. But by the time I got cranking, they were just rocking the free world. And his magic to me was timing. That was the key, which is the key to great comedy. But boy, that timing between Dick and Bert.
Well, his influences were, the early radio comedy, Jack Benny, Bob and Ray, which I like learned to appreciate. Probably a few people of my generation listened to Bob and Ray and Jack Benny, growing up, but I did. And I still love all the Bob and Ray routines. I mean, those guys were just amazingly very funny, very deadpan. Yeah.
You know who reminds me of them, and then we'll get on to your book.
Oh.
Who reminds me of them? And wife and I were traveling recently on the road, and I flipped across, must have caught them on satellite. Is Bob and Tom?
I don't know them.
Radio guys out of, I think, Chicago was such a powerful force for radio. And when I left Detroit, went to Chicago, spent about 5-6 years there, had 3 different shows, and Chicago was just kicking ass. But Bob and Tom has that same Dick and Bert timing. You can tell they're pals. They've been together forever. They finish each other's sentences. Anyway, that whole background is magic. And I have to believe helps you launch this prolific career creating a voiceover business and scripts and gaming. Let's spend a second to talk about that, because, sure, you have an MFA in creative writing.
Because I didn't know what else to do. So
But let's talk about that day job. I doubt that it's now, because you got too much other things going on. But that Double R Studios in Sherman Oaks, I was reading about that this morning, and I'm always looking for a studio to work with. So now that I know, and it's still there, I got to.
It is, yeah. My uncle actually runs it day to day. So yeah.
Cool. That it's so nice to find a studio in Hollywood ish and be able to work with. But let's talk about that. How did you go from creative writing to gaming and that whole world?
Oh, well, I had a son, and he'd like to play video games. I'd be playing video games with him. And one of the things I noticed playing his games, so first of all, I really enjoyed playing the games with him. And this was like the mid 90s. But the writing and the voice acting was like horrendous in them, a lot of them anyway. And, and I thought, boy, they really could use someone who knows how to do this. So I kind of reached out. I started going to gaming conventions. I went to GDC, Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, and to E3 in Los Angeles. And I just started networking and meeting people and told them, and basically kind of selling my services as someone who could cast and direct voice talent. And so I started getting hired doing that. But then I would be sent scripts that were really pretty horrible. And, I was a screenwriter at the time. I was working as a screenwriter as well. And I offered to rewrite the scripts for them. And from there, I started getting hired by companies to conceive the stories with them. And, I started 17 years ago writing video games. So, and so it's really changed quite a bit since I started. Before it was very minimal graphics in terms of facial expressions.
Yeah.
You had to write like you were writing for the theater, because as if people were sitting in the back row of the theater, they couldn't really see the faces. So the voices had to do all the work.
Right.
But now it's full on animation with facial motion capture. And so, the actors can emote without using their voices as well. So it's just like writing movies, honestly, and that's when they talk about my math, was my background writing film scripts. So writing games is a lot different than writing movies, just because they're so interactive and players have a lot of control of the story. So it required a kind of an adjustment in my thinking how to do it. And the other thing is, no one had really figured out how to do it exactly yet either when I started. And I don't think anyone has yet either, but there are some games that just have amazing writing and acting. And, they're making streaming shows based on games, and they're much better than the movies based on games used to be, because game stories were pretty thin before. And now, they're a lot more, the characters are a lot deeper, and there's a lot more complexity of the stories. So like the Witcher series based on these fantastic games from Poland, and a series that's coming out on HBO called The Last of Us, based on a game that was done by Sony. And that was an amazingly written game. It won the Writers Guild Award for best game script, which I was nominated for, but that was like 2012. I did a game with Tim Curry and Jonathan Pryce, and it was just it was had an amazing cast, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm amazed at how gaming has, we grew up, like you said, the cartoons were flat and 1 or 2 dimensional, and now you have to look and go, is that real? I mean, it's off the charts, which makes me wonder how long it will be, especially with this move of AI infiltrating everything. How long is it going to be before it's so real you can't tell the difference?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's still that uncanny valley with that kind of CGI animation where it doesn't quite feel real. But with the facial mocap, when I record games in the studio, they wear these like rigs on their heads, and it captures every expression. And it's their face. It looks like a movie. I mean, when you see certain CGI movies now, it's very hyper realistic, and the same companies that do the movies are also work on the games. It's become one big thing at this point.
Where did I hear the statistic that the money of gaming, if you took, I'm gonna kind of hatchet this, I think, if you took all of movies and major sports combined, gaming far surpasses that as far as income.
It does. It's kind of amazing, especially because it's kind of a limited audience still. It's not, it's not like, people are, our age for the most part aren't, though it's changing, aren't gamers. Though the average gamer now is like in their 30s and 40s. It's not, like it was when we were teenagers, when it was just teenagers. It's just becoming much more mainstream. You probably haven't looked at a video game in a long time, have you? Like one of the newer ones.
I'll be honest with you, and I'm going to sound like a real, I don't know, either a nerd or a dumbass here, one or the other, take your pick. I have never really played those video games. I think because I just got too many other things going, and I have a feeling, especially if it involves like race cars or anything like that, I have a feeling I would be one of those guys that would be sucked in, and the wife would come home one day and go, "What have you been doing all day?" "I've been right here, doing this all day." I'm not
injuring your thumbs. Probably you have thumb issues. To me, it's just another entertainment medium. It's like watching streaming shows on TV or movies, and so it's generational too. I think not many people in our generation are gamers. It's there's a few, but it's a small percentage. You go down, like my son is 32, and him and his girlfriend, his wife, now at this point, play games they play them all the time, and it's just something they do besides watching TV or whatever else they do. And they're both computer programmers. They're kind of into nerd culture, so they're really into it. So,
well, when I saw this proliferation of guys sitting at home playing the games and then playing it and then broadcasting it in real time, and then people watching that, and those audiences getting huge. It just shows my ignorance, because I'm like, what? Wait a minute. I'm going to sit and watch you play your video game.
You know what? It seems crazy to me too, honestly, but it's become one of the ways I got into working in games, beyond the way I got my first break, was I was playing with my son a lot, and he'd always kick my ass. He was just much better than I was. So I would stay up late. I'm very competitive. I'd stay up late at night when he went to bed, and I just keep practicing. And I got really good at this one game called Soldier of Fortune 2. And so good that I was like one of the top 100 players in the world. and I got recruited into like clans to play in matches, and so I met the people who created the game. And they found out I was a screenwriter, the guy who wrote the game, and asked me if I could help him find contacts in screenwriting. I said I would if he could help me find contacts in gaming. And so we kind of exchanged contact people, and I took a lot of people out to lunch, and that's kind of how I got my first job. Wow. But I'm not, you know what? It takes a lot of practice, and so it's very competitive, and it's like a sport, but it's a sport where you're just sitting on your ass, just moving your hands. So
you don't stay in shape that way, Harris. I don't know if you knew that or not.
You don't. But what you know, what's interesting is the professional gamer guys who do it are in really good shape. They swear that they have to stay in good shape to be able to do it, and you kind of burn out at it by age 30. You've like lost your ability to be that fast. You know, that those fast twitch muscles start to fade.
Sure. Your host, David Temple here. Hey, before we get back to the show, I thought I would throw in this one quick note. I have had authors approach me who want to actually advertise on the show, and I'm like, that's cool. I love that idea. I mean, think about it. We feature the best thriller writers in the world. You're one of the new up-and-coming thriller writers in the world to be, and you have a book coming out. Our rates are super reasonable. We're easy to work with, as you know, and we all want to work together to make success for all of us. Just reach out to us here at The Thriller Zone at thethrillerzone@gmail.com. Let's talk rates. Let's talk details. Let's do something together in the new year. I think you'll like it. Now, back to the show. Well, I say a similar thing to writers. When I see writers who, this is just my own personal opinion, when I see writers not take care of themselves because we are often sitting at a desk for hours and hours and hours on end, I'm like, you're not doing yourself any favors if you're not constantly stretching and, yoga or working out, which I do all of that stuff, because I found myself, I was a couple of years into it, and I found myself doing this, getting that, that kind of a hunchback. And I went to a chiropractor. Dude, what do you do for a living? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I sit like this all day long. So we started doing training to keep your shoulders back. I won't go into all that, but point being, you got to stay in shape because your body, body in motion stays in motion, and you keep your brain waves percolating.
Yeah, I feel like writing takes a lot of, my wife thinks this is crazy, but I feel like writing takes a lot of like energy. And so I need to be feel like I'm in good physical shape and full of energy to sit down to start writing. If I'm not full of energy, nothing is coming for me, so.
No, that's why I'm a big fan of working out early in the morning, hit the gym about 5:30 and then start writing, shortly thereafter. But, there's a couple things that I want to cover as we get into this, because the James Flynn escapade. So my logical question as we sit here talk about gaming, and I just love to get it immersed in your world. Besides, so we got You Only Live Once, you got Once Is Never Enough, Gold Hammer. How about this as a game?
It would be a possibility, but
infringement?
Yeah. Well, no. I could like pitch this to a game studio and see if they'd be interested. Honestly, I think they would be less they'd rather have like a bigger IP, I think, to work with if they're going to sell it like that. Though it's possible you could do this as a game, but writing a game is, like I said, is very different than writing a book. Where the book, I have complete control of where the plot goes, and it's a linear story. With the game, you have to give the player some choices and directions, so it's not as much a linear story usually. But it could be a game. There's no doubt. I mean, The Last of Us, the one I told, is a very kind of a linear story. And you'll probably see the HBO show when it comes on, and that worked great as a game. So
wait a minute, what HBO what?
It's called The Last of Us.
Okay,
and I think it comes out early next year.
You mentioned that earlier. I just want to make sure I wrote it down. Okay.
Yeah. And it could easily be a game, but it's if the great thing about writing a novel, and I worked as a screenwriter for a long time, so I was kind of in development hell for a long time. A lot of projects, lots of notes from studio executives.
Yeah.
when I'm writing the book, part of the reason I started writing books is, I just wanted to do something that was just mine,
Yeah.
and not have to, everything else I do is a collaboration, which I
Yep.
enjoy doing, but I wanted something that was just for me, and
Yeah.
so that's why I started writing the books.
I
And
totally get that.
yeah,
I totally
yeah.
get that. And, to switch in midstream again, so let's take this away from a game and turn it into a movie or a TV series, because this would be a great, like you mentioned at the top of the show about, excuse me, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and those shows. And those series weren't they half hours? Because
No, they were, at least The Man from U.N.C.L.E., it was an hour. I think, and so was Secret Agent Man. I think
yeah,
they
so
were-
basically
I
40,
Spy. Yeah.
yeah, 44 to 48
Right,
minutes.
exactly.
So my point being, this would be a great, great series. I'm looking at, this is the world of streaming. We sit down and we just binge all this stream stuff, and this would be so perfect.
Well, it did recently. The series got optioned by a TV production company called Avalon Entertainment, which is based in the UK. And actually, I had a couple studios interested in it, which honestly surprised me. I didn't really seek that out, but it was mentioned in this. There's this monthly newsletter thing called the the Optionist, and they kind of each week they kind of uh, tell studio executives what IPs they think would make good movies or TV shows.
Right.
And somehow they found my book and they put it in, and it got a lot of attention. And so I got some offers, and we ended up going with Avalon, and it just happened. So nothing's happened yet in terms of actually any moving towards production. And having been in the movie business for a long time, development can take a very long time. So I may be quite elderly by the time people see it, but I do think it would make a great series. Honestly, before I wrote the book, I wrote it as a film script, and I had optioned it years ago, and I really love one of the scripts I love the most, but it just never got made, which is true of a lot of projects. And so that's part of the reason why I decided to write it as a book. And I got so much deeper into it when I decided to do it as a book. It's such a different medium as well. And I think it improved, honestly. And being able to write a series of books and kind of get deeper into the character with each book, it's been good. So yeah, I'd love to see it as a series, and hopefully that'll happen. So
you make me think of Mark Graney, who's been on this show a number of times, and he said the last time he was on, he goes, David, you have no idea. The Gray Man, which came out with Ryan Gosling, was optioned a half a dozen times, sent into turnaround a couple of different times. I think it's about 10 years it's taken that to get on the screen. And now, because of the integrity of his caliber of writing and the heft of that story, and now with the heft of that bankable star behind him, I think the rumor is they're going to make that an ongoing series. Like, it's going to be the next Jason Bourne thing.
Oh, like a film series. Yeah, I saw that, and I'm a fan of his books. So yeah, I thought it was and I actually read about how they changed it somewhat for the movie compared to the books. Sometimes that's good, sometimes not, I think. But,
I'll tell you something. Yeah. This is a great tangent to take about 60 seconds on, because I agree with Mark. Mark said this. He goes, I was making a comment about, and this relates to you as well. Hey, what do you think about Hollywood taking Gray Man and kind of diverting some? He goes, dude, I wrote my story the way I wanted to write it. I sold the book, happy trails, and then they come around years later and they want to adapt it to what story they want it to be. Go for it. And I was like, that is so refreshing, because you hear so many people go, oh, you took my story and it distorted it. No, your story was your story, and the gist is still there. Yeah. But it's kind of like Jack Reacher in the Lee Child series, right? everyone's like, oh, but Tom Cruise is so little. And then the new guy comes out. Oh, he's a huge guy. That works. I'm like, it's adaptation, dude. I mean, aren't you just...
Yeah. Though I have to say, I did like the streaming series better than the Reacher movies. Honestly, because I couldn't get the idea that Reacher was gigantic out of my head. So,
And 99.9% of other people said the exact same thing.
But, and I think his attitude is the best attitude to have, because once you option it and hand it over, you don't really have much say so, and you'll drive yourself insane worrying about trying to make it. But in my case, because I was a screenwriter before, I did, they know that I'm interested in helping in that part of the process. But even then, I know, it's a different medium. It's going to have to change, and that's fine, honestly, as long as it's as good as it can be as a streaming series or a movie. It just it's its own thing. And I know it, I have the books no matter what. I've done it the way I want to do it, and they'll always be there no matter what.
Yeah, I think it's a little on the myopic side to sit there and worry about that when they could say, oh, you don't like that? Oh, we'll take it back. We'll give it back to you. I'm like, no. I love your ideas. That's great.
Honestly, the other thing for me, because I'm not anywhere near this, as some of these writers you interview. By the way, I love your podcast. I love,
Thank you.
Some of my favorite thriller authors have been on, and I'm nowhere near their level. But so what this will do for me, if they actually do a series, it'll help me sell a lot more books. It'll really, it's the best advertising it can be, really. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, anyway, I'll make one more comment and then I'll move off of that. I remember when I first got into radio in the major markets, it was Detroit, and I got written up in Page 6 because I was hanging out with some people that were, anyway, it doesn't matter. And mafia. Anyway, and so the guy, my boss said, dude, no worries. I was worried. Oh, what happens when that hits the Detroit Free Press? Dude, any press is good press. And from then on, I'm like, you're damn straight. So I say to you, and the people go, oh, but I want a different deal. Dude, just be glad somebody wants your deal.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's better just to let it go. I think casting and all that is important for especially something like my series, but it's true of anything, really, right? That's why Cruise for me wasn't as good. I didn't remember the new actor's name, but I thought he was kind of great.
Alan Ritchson.
Oh, Alan, yeah, he was really good.
Speaking of which, Andrew Child next week, 100th
I know, that's
episode.
so exciting. I can't believe I'm on the week before, honestly. Yeah, I've read. I think they've done 2 together now, or more. There's been more. But I read
Andrew and Lee. You mean? Oh, this is number 5. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Side note. Speaking of which, so Lee has written a book every single year since '97. Bam.
Yeah, I read a book about the writing of one of those Reacher books. Did you read that? It was he worked. As he wrote, I forget which book it was. He worked with a writer, and the writer kind of went through the whole process he uses when he's writing a book. I found that really fascinating.
Oh, wait. Yes. Yeah. Break that down for me, because I can't recall the exact details.
It was I don't have the details either, but it was about someone kind of just going through the whole process with him from the inception of the story all the way through the writing to the end, and just how he goes about doing it. And he's they talk about pantsers and
otters, yeah,
right, and he really seems like a pantser. It's like the way he did it. I just I can't write like that. It was just interesting for me to read. I could never keep everything straight in my head if I just made it up as I went along. I have to outline it, maybe because I was a screenwriter. I don't know.
I think it's good protocol. I think I have heard that September. Well, I want to say the maybe Labor Day weekend, or maybe the Monday right after Labor Day, he sits down
That's it.
and he just rolls with it, and he just goes until he finishes it, and that's it. And I do think it's off the top of his head. Now, then you talk to his brother, and he's much more, he likes a little bit of outline and structure so that he kind of
That's
keeps the
interesting.
details straight. Yeah. But when you're writing with writing partners, and I learned this from Andrews Wilson, one guy has a specialty that this is his thing, and then the other one is this thing, and then when they come together, it always works. So, dude, whatever works, right?
Yeah, no, I would. Yeah, I've never written. I've written screenplays and plays with writing partners. Everything except I haven't written a novel that way. So,
Well,
yeah.
it does beg the question: what's next for James Flynn?
Well, I just turned the fourth book into my publisher, and it's I don't want to go too deep into the story yet because probably won't come out till next summer. But there's the story set now. Flynn is in this mental hospital in Pasadena, which is a pretty benign place, and the people there who are his fellow patients are kind of quirky and troubled, but they're not dangerous in the slightest bit. So in this book, Flynn actually ends up getting sent to a forensic mental hospital in California, a state hospital that holds it's like serial killers and spree murderers, and so now he's like dealing with much different type of fellow patients. So
Nice. And that's coming out when, do you think?
next summer.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
By the way, as I flipped open the book, I just noticed Juan Patron does your cover design.
He did the cover for that. He did a great job, I thought. I love these covers.
Yeah, the reason he caught my eye is he did a book cover for someone else, and I'm like, oh, who's this guy? And then he and I became Instagram or Twitter fans and friends, and yeah, just great, dude. Everything about this is, I want to, for people who go, oh, is it like James Bond? Like, it has an influence of, but it's more fun. Being funny. So
yeah, I mean, honestly, I based it on when I originally came up with the concept. I wanted to do a modern day version of Don Quixote, so that was my right. So that was my initial inspiration, and I thought rather than being a knight errant, who would Don Quixote be if he was existing today? And honestly, he'd probably be a superhero. But from my perspective, in my formative years, that superhero was James Bond. Yeah. So I just thought, he would think he's someone like James Bond, is super spy, and that's what in a way, Bond and all those kinds of spies are kind of knight errants. They go out into the world and rescue damsels in distress and save the world. So it's pretty similar.
Hey, before we start to wrap up, I do have a question. What do you think about? I just read in New York Times recently that the people behind the James Bond series they have decided to go with like a 30-year-old guy instead of, there was Idris Elba and a couple of other guys in the running. Yeah. But now they're thinking about going younger because they want to, project 5, 10 plus years down the road. What do you think about that? Or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Sean Connery was 32 when he started. Yeah, so I think they've done that previously in the books. He's in his 30s, so it makes sense that if they want to start and they're going to reboot the series, they would want someone that they could go through a number of films without aging out of it. I think like Roger Moore by the end was looking a little old to be hanging out with like 20-somethings. It got a little creepy actually by the end. So
is that your daughter?
Yeah.
Well, before we get to our fun and games section, I'd like to ask you what I ask all my authors. And since you're a fan, by the way, thank you for the very nice comments. If you, I want to hear your best piece of advice for all would-be writers out there listening to the show.
Well, I've listened, as I am a fan, I've heard other people, and I've heard other people give the same advice. And I would say, and it's the same for me, it's persistence. It's, you just have to be persistent because look at me, it took me a long time to get to a place where I had like a novel series. And I've gone through a lot of different parts of a lot of different writing careers to get here, and it just took a long time. Even when I was a screenwriter, it took me 7 years before I sold my first screenplay. So you just have to be persistent and believe in yourself, and you'll get better because you're doing that that 10,000 hour rule.
10,000 hours.
Yeah, right. So you kind of learn your craft. So it's really, to me, it's mainly about persistence.
Superb advice. And you know what? I don't know why anybody thinks that they can master something in less than a couple of years or so, or 10,000 hours. I'm like, and I always say this, especially to my golfing buddies. I'm like, did you pick up a driver, head out to the tee driving range and crush it straight 300 plus the first time? No, of course not. So, but after years of that, you get better. So anyway, well, excellent advice. Well, it is time for rapid fire questions, which, we have to play a little bit of this, and I think you'll be the perfect person for it. All right, you wake up one day to find yourself locked inside a video game, something you have experience with. What character would you most like to be, and what weapon would you use to get out of a sticky situation? This can be serious or preferably funny.
Okay, well, I'm going to pick one of my own characters who is Sam B from Dead Island, who was a one-hit wonder rapper who was great at killing zombies, and he had a combination shotgun chainsaw. So when he ran out of shotgun shells, he would use the chainsaw part. So that would get you out of most situations.
Oh, geez. Okay. In a similar move, James Flynn has called to invite you to join him fight the evil warlord who is seeking world domination. What is your secret power?
Wow. I would say mind reading.
Because you can anticipate every move.
Right. I can know what he's going to do. I know. Yeah, I can plan far ahead and anticipate everything.
Now that's clever. I have yet to hear that one. Leave it to a writer. Okay, good. All right, finally, if you could land, and this is more kind of introspective to the guy, our age probably. If you could land the quintessential Hollywood or literary gig, I don't care what it is, the world is your oyster. What would it be and why?
You mean if I could? Are you talking about me like writing a franchise?
If you could snap your fingers, and whether it's James Flynn or fill in the blank, and you could think of, what would the ultimate dream be? Snap your fingers and it happens. What would it be?
Yeah. Well, I would love to be able to write and direct a James Flynn movie, a big budget movie. That would be really fun, honestly.
Have you ever directed anything before?
I have short pieces. Sure. And nothing at this scale. Though I direct all the video games I work in. I direct in the in the mocap and the sound stages for mocap. So I do a lot of directing for those. And I'll have to send you some clips of some games so you can see how advanced they are and how much they look like kind of blockbuster movies at this point.
All right, folks. If you'd like to learn more, visit harisorkin.com. And as you'll notice, as the font will say below, 1R in Harris. Follow him and James Flynn, of course, on Twitter at Haris Orkin. Dude, this has been so good. And it's so cool to have had you. I feel like I have known you before from the association with your father, and then the way we've just kind of communicated via social media. So it's been cool getting to know you even better.
No, it's nice. hopefully I'm going to be going to ButcherCon this coming year. So hopefully, if you're there, we'll be able to meet in person. I look forward to that. Yeah.
Oh, I'll be there, dude. That's just right down the street. That's about 20 minutes away. And people were asking me if I was going to go to this past one in Minneapolis. And I'm like, no, why would I do that when I can just wait till it's right down the street?
That's why I'm going. Yeah.
And Comic-Con is right down the street, too. And I know you get your hands full of that.
I do. I've been on panels at Comic-Con quite a bit, actually. I didn't go this year, but I'll probably go next year.
Well, once again, Haris, I wish you huge success. The book, again, is You Only Live Once, and it's a hoot of a read.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks again to Haris Orkin and the book, You Only Live Once. It's a fun read, folks. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, next week's show introduces you, in case you haven't seen her on this show before, Wanda Morris. She's going to come into the studio and talk about Anywhere You Run, yet another page-turning thriller. This young gal knows how to write, and she's delightful with a capital D. So I hope you'll join us next week. I'm David Temple, your host. I'll see you then for another edition of The Thriller Zone.